Today in our 2018 Chevrolet Sonic, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster Taillight Wiring Kit for towed vehicles with an LED bulb and socket. That's going to be part number RM-152-LED. Now to help us with our installation, we're also going to be using the Roadmaster 7-wire to 6-wire straight cord kit that's 6.5 feet long, part number RM-98146-7. Now keep in mind this is only going to be one component of a safe, complete flat tow setup. For a complete setup, you are going to need a base plate, tow bar wiring, a tow bar, and a braking system. Specifically for our Sonic, we also used a FuseMaster fuse bypass because we do need to pull fuses for them. Whenever we're towing our Sonic with our motorhome, we want the lights to match so we can safely get down the road and everybody knows what's going on behind us. With the Roadmaster LED bulb and socket kit, we're not going to have to worry about splicing into our car's wiring. It's going to completely bypass it, and we're going to have a separate LED bulb that will mount inside of our taillight. The big benefit to that is that we're still going to get all of those functions like our taillights, turn signals, and our brake lights, but we're not going to have to cut any of our factory wiring and worry about damaging the wiring or voiding the warranty. Now compared to other kind of wiring kits like a diode wiring kit, those diodes are in there to help protect the vehicle, make sure there's no short circuits or backfeeding from the motorhome. However, with our bulb and socket kit, we're not going to have to worry about backfeeding because it's not even going into our electrical system at all. We are going to have to drill a hole in order to get that bulb into the taillight housing. However, if we change our mind or we say get rid of our car one day, we can simply just get a new taillight housing and everything would be back to stock. We wouldn't have to worry about any kind of connectors with the wirings back there or dealing with those magnetic lights every time we want to tow. It's going to be a one-time installation, and once it's in there, we don't have to worry about anything. So now that we've seen our lights work and gone over some of the benefits, let's show you how to get them installed. To begin our installation, we're going to have to remove the fascia. So we're going to start up top here, and on each side, we're going to have 3 push pins on the top of the radiator cover that we're going to have to remove. So you're going to want to take a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool. You're going to come underneath the center section of the push pin, pop it out, and then come underneath the outer section and pull the rest of the push pin out. There's going to be 3 of these on each side, so we'll go ahead and take out the other 3. We're also going to have a few 10mm bolts on each side to remove as well. So we're going to grab a 10mm socket, and we'll pull the 3 bolts out on each side. In the wheel well area, we're going to have to pull out some Torx bits. There's going to be 3 going along the edge here. So you're going to want to grab a T20 Torx bit and pull those out. And then right above all of those fasteners, if we come right to where our fender meets our fascia here, at the corner here, we're going to have a bolt going vertically, and you're going to want to grab a T15 Torx bit to pull that one out. Once we have that last one removed, we're going to repeat that on the other side as well. Now on the underside, right along the edge, we're going to have 3 more Torx screws that we're going to have to pull out. And again, I'm going to be using a T20 Torx bit to pull those screws out. And we're going to have 3 on each side in the same location, so we'll go ahead and pull those out as well. Now if we come to the center of this belly pan here, we're going to have another push pin. Again, just take a trim panel tool or a flathead screwdriver. We're going to pop that center section out. Then we can pull the rest of the clip out. And on either side of that push pin, we're going to have 2 bolts that are holding that belly pan in place. So we can grab a 13mm socket and remove those 2 bolts. Now at the very front of our belly pan, the very center, there's going to be another Torx screw holding it in place. So we'll grab a T20 Torx bit and pull that out. And with that final bolt removed, we'll remove the belly pan and set it aside. Now on each side with that belly pan removed, it's going to expose a Phillips head screw. So we'll go ahead and grab a Phillips screwdriver and pull that out. Now with that extra set of hands, we'll get ready to remove our fascia. You're going to want to slightly pull up and grab where the fender meets the fascia. and start peeling it away, unlocking the tabs as we go. Now if you have fog lights or any other connectors, before you pull it too far away, you're going to want to make sure you disconnect those. And pull back on this lock and remove it. We can push down on that tab and pull the connector out. Then we can set our fascia aside. We're going to start at the front here, and our base plate has a spot to mount our wiring. So you just want to make sure that you leave enough excess up here that we can make all of our connections later on. So I'm just going to wrap a little bit around the post here. And then we're going to take the length of wire and we're going to have to run it towards the back of the vehicle so we can meet up with our taillights. Now, the exhaust and the air cooler is all right here in the front, so I would suggest coming over to the passenger side and routing it along the passenger side because we'll have plenty of room. So I'll go ahead and route this and then I'll show you how I did it. So I ran my wire across this fascia support down here at the bottom, came over to the passenger side, and I came underneath this cover, running it along the front of the frame here, went over this cross member, I was zip tying it along the way to some existing lines. I ran it towards the outside where all these other lines are, just following the same path. And when I got to this cover, I went inside. Then I had my wire come out towards the outside edge over here, followed it up over the rear axle, my fuel filler neck, running along down the frame, and then finally going back behind the wheel well cover and coming out right here. The next step we're going to need to do is we're going to need to separate all of our wires. So we're going to want to separate these as far up and as close as we can get it to where we're at the back bumper. Now we should be able to just kind of grab the wire to separate it and start pulling it. And again, you're going to want to separate each one as high up as you can get it. So with all of our wires separated, we're going to move back up top and pull our taillight assemblies out. To get the taillight assemblies out, we're going to open up the hatch. We're going to have two fasteners that are holding it in place. So we can grab a Phillips screwdriver and pull those fasteners out. Then you're going to want to grab your taillight assembly and very gently kind of rock the intersection out. You may take a little bit of wiggling, but you're going to want to pull it as straight back as you can because you don't want to break the alignment pins that are on the back side. Then we're going to need to remove all of the lights that are in our taillight. So we'll just turn them and pull the entire bulb and socket out of the taillight assembly. Just want to make sure you get them all. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and unclip the wires as well. That way we can actually set the assembly aside and it won't be attached to the housing anymore. Just want to be careful not to break the clips or damage the wires. I'm going to go ahead and set our assembly aside and repeat the same process for the other taillight. So now that our taillights are separated, we're going to need to get our wiring up here. So we're working over here on the passenger side. I'm going to take a piece of airline tube that I had laying around. I'm going to go in between the body and the bumper here. I'm going to pass it down until it comes out the bottom of the bumper. So my airline tube came out right at the bottom of my bumper area, right by where the wires are going up into that wheel well section. Now since we're over on the passenger side, we're just going to want to grab the brown, green, and white wires. We're going to leave the yellow wire down here at the bottom for now. So I'm going to take my brown, green, and white wire, and I'm going to take some electrical tape and secure it to my airline tube, making sure it doesn't fall off when I go to pull it up top. So we'll just pull our pull wire up. We're going to pull all the slack out of our wire and make sure it doesn't get caught underneath. What I like to do is have a decent amount of tension on those wires. Then I'm just going to zip tie it to the factory wiring that we don't have to worry about it falling down, and I know I'm going to have enough slack that I don't have to worry about making my connections. So we're going to estimate about how much wire we're going to need to reach our taillight. And a good way to figure that out is if we find the farthest one towards the top, which is going to be that black and red wire, we can grab all 3 wires, bring them up to that bulb and socket, and that's about how much wire we're going to need, if not a little bit more than we need. So we can go ahead and cut each wire. We want to make sure that we hold on to the excess wire as well. So we're going to take our wires and we're going to strip back the end of each of them. Then we can grab our bulb and socket here. And just to go over the connections we're going to make, our red wire is going to get hooked up to our green wire, our brown wire to the brown, and our white to the black. Now in our kit they do provide you with some butt connectors. However, we're going to be replacing these with some heat shrink butt connectors because they are going to provide us with more protection against any kind of corrosion buildup or moisture getting inside the connection. So anytime you see me use one of these yellow ones, it's to replace the yellow butt connector and the blue heat shrink to replace the blue butt connector from our kit. So we'll start with our green wire, which is going to be for our turn signal and our brake light. Take our butt connector, slide it over the stripped end of the wire, crimp it in place, and then taking the red wire, making sure we pull that insulation off, put the bare wire into the butt connector and crimp it down. Our brown wire, however, is going to be a little bit different. We're going to take that excess wire that we had before and we're going to strip back the end of it. Now we're going to take the 2 stripped ends of our wires and we're going to tie them together. And now you're going to want to grab one of the yellow butt connectors, slide it over our wire and crimp it in place. And grab the brown wire coming from the bulb and socket. I'll slide that into our connector and crimp that down. And we're going to do the same thing with our white wire, except we're going to be hooking it to the black wire coming off the bulb and socket. I'm going to be using a heat gun to shrink down the connectors. If you're using an open flame like a torch or a lighter, you're going to be extremely careful not to burn or char the connector or the wires themselves. So now the brown and white wire that we had excess coming off, that's going to go back down between the body and the bumper, and it's going to meet up with our yellow wire. So we're going to use the same method of using that airline tube to make sure we can meet up with that yellow wire. So now we're going to take our brown, white, and yellow wire, and we're going to run it over to the driver's side and take it up to the taillight just like we did on this side. Now there's not a whole lot to tie these wires to, so it's not a bad idea to go over the frame and then we can run it along the back side behind the bumper here and find whatever we need to and whatever we can to zip tie it in place so it doesn't fall down or cause any damage. Another thing I want to mention is that it is extremely close to the exhaust, so you want to be careful when you're routing it to make sure you go over and stay as far away from this as you can. And I'm just going to take another zip tie and tie my wiring to the factory wiring so I don't have to worry about it dropping down. So again, we're going to estimate about how much wire we're going to need, and we'll cut our 3 wires. This time, again, you want to hold on to that excess white wire. We can take our new socket, and the connections are going to be relatively the same over here. Brown to brown, yellow to red, and white to black. So we'll strip back the end of the 3 wires and start making our connections. So we went ahead and made our connections, but again on that white wire we want to double up on one end and have the excess wire coming out the back. So now we're going to make sure you strip back the end of that wire. We're going to take the included ring terminal in our kit, slide it over our wire and crimp it in place. Now this is going to be acting as our ground, so we're going to need to find a nice spot that we can mount this. I'm going to be going right here. That way it'll be out of the way of the tail light, but it's also on a nice flat piece of metal right here. They do provide you with the self-tapping screw in your kit. You just need a 5/16 nut driver to put it in place. You just want that to be tight enough to where that ring terminal isn't going to slide around. Now, in order to get our actual LED bulbs and sockets into our taillight housing, we are going to have to drill a hole. So you're looking for a location that's going to fit, but also not interfere with the other factory lights, as well as being in the red section. You don't want to go into the clear section of the housing. So we can either go on the top or the bottom. And if we look at the back of our housing, it looks like to me there would be a little bit more room on the top section just because we have these plastic brackets that hold our wiring in place. So if we come from the factory mounting point, come towards the inside, right about where this textured piece begins, if we come right to the edge there, we should have plenty of room. Now we're going to need to drill a 1-inch hole, and it does need to be circular. So your best bet is going to be using a hole saw, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using a 1-inch hole saw. I'm just going to drill straight into the tail light and make sure that I do have enough room. So now that we have this one drilled, we're going to go ahead and repeat that for the other one as well. Where their holes drilled, we can go ahead and test fit our bulb. And as you can see, it is going to be a little bit loose, but that's where these tabs are for on the back of the socket here. So we're going to take a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to bend these tabs out. When we put our bulb into the socket, these tabs will grab onto the housing and keep it nice and secure. Just go around bending all the tabs out slightly. We can grab our housing, we can push our bulb into place. You can see it's a much snugger fit now. We won't have to worry about it falling out. So we're going to go ahead and do that for the other one as well. Now, if you look at the LED here, you can see that the wires go into the housing and it's just kind of exposed. So it's not a bad idea to come back with some silicone. You're going to want to fill that hole up to make sure that moisture and kind of water or debris can't get in there. And then at the same time, I'm going to go around the edge of my bulb so I don't have to worry about my taillight housing having moisture in it either. So make sure you get a good amount of silicone going all the way around the bulb and in the back of the socket where the wires come in. And we'll go ahead and do that for both of the bulbs. So now that we have our sockets and bulbs in place, I'm going to put all our factory bulbs back in our taillight housing and then put the housings back in place as well. Put all of our wires back in the clips. You want to line up your tail light and just push it in until it secures. Then we're going to replace those 2 Phillips screws and do the same thing on the other side. Now before we put the plug on the front of our vehicle, we are going to want to put the fascia back on. That way it'll minimize the amount of cutting that we're going to have to do. And with the fascia trimmed and back on, we can go ahead and put all the fasteners back in place that we removed in the beginning. And put back the fasteners that came out of the wheel well. And before we put the belly pan back on, you want to make sure you put those Phillips screws back into the fascia support. Because once the belly pan's back on, we won't have access to them. We can put the belly pan back up, put all the hardware back in place. We're going to replace the bolts. And we'll put all the fasteners back along the front edge as well. So now we're going to need to separate our wires so that we can mount up our plug. Just want to pull them apart. We don't need to go that far back, but you want enough room that you can work with. So we'll pull them apart and we're going to strip back the end of each one of our wires. So now we can take our socket. We're going to pull the dust cover off. You want to feed your wires through the back of it. And for now, we're just going to slide it back so it's out of the way. Then if we look on the back of our plug, each one of these terminals is going to be labeled, making it a lot easier to get everything in place. So the top one's going to be TM. It's going to be our brown wire for our trailer marker. GD for ground, which is going to be our white wire. LT for left turn, which will be our yellow wire. And then over here it'll be RT for right turn, and that'll be the green wire. So you're going to want to grab a small screwdriver so we can loosen up those set screws. So we'll loosen up that screw. And take our wires, put them inside the terminal. Now I always like to leave just a little bit of wire exposed to the very top. That way I know that it's not going to have a bad connection because of the insulation. But you do want to make sure you get it all the way in there and you tighten up that set screw. So we'll do that for the other 3 remaining wires. So now with all of our connections made, I'm going to take a little bit of dielectric grease. I'm going to backfill this connector here. Make sure I don't have to worry about any kind of corrosion buildup or moisture getting inside. So let's put a good amount on the connectors there. And then we're going to take our dust cover and slide it back over the end. I always like to take a little bit of electrical tape and wrap the dust cover in the connector. That way I don't have to worry about it coming off. And then just to help hide the wires a little bit as well, we can wrap some of the wire as far back as we can reach, and that'll help protect it a little bit, but also just keep the color down on the front of our vehicle so we don't have such bright colored wires hanging out. I'm going to take a couple self-tapping screws. I'm going to secure my electrical connector to the 2 posts that are on my base plate. Also going to have to wire up the vehicle end of our cord. They've already wired up the 7-way section, but we're going to have to make the connections for the 6-way. So we're going to have 2 screws on the plug itself. So again, when we grab that Phillips head screwdriver, you want to loosen this one on the back, but we don't need to take it all the way out. And then this small screw on the front, we are going to want to take it all the way out, but you want to keep an eye on it because this is very small and very easy to lose. With that screw removed, we can go ahead and pull out the connector itself. And then we're going to take the silver end and we're going to feed our wires through. And there's a little gate right there. You want to make sure that you're on the side that has that curve going through the opening. So we'll pass all those wires through, kind of slide it back a little bit so we have some room to work with. And just like the other one, we are going to have some labels. These are going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to see, but we're going to have G for ground, T for tail lights, S is going to be our stop, and that's going to be the blue wire, R for right turn, green wire, L for left turn, that's the yellow wire, and then finally that center pin is where our black wire is going to go. So again, just take a small Phillips screwdriver, loosen up the set screws, and start putting all of our wires in place. So with our connections made, we're going to slide that silver piece back over the connector. We're going to line up those holes again. We can take that small screw, put it back in place, and then this section back here, we're just going to tighten this up so it's a little snug. You don't want to crush the wire, but that'll keep it from pulling the connectors out up farther forward on the cord. Now all I have left to do is to test it and make sure all the signals are working properly. So with my tester plugged up, I'm going to go ahead and run through my functions to make sure they're working properly. So here we can see my tail lights are coming on, as well as the left turn signal, my brake lights, and my right turn signal. So now all we have left to do is hook up to our motorhome and hit the road. And that'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster Taillight Wiring Kit for towed vehicles with the LED bulb and socket, part number RM-152-LED on our 2018 Chevrolet Sonic.